Well, first of all, I really appreciate being invited here, especially by Commodore Evans. And as I'll get to it in the slides later on, a number of people that contributed to this. You know, I'm thinking about a kind of a story that I'd heard in the past about a professor, and he was a very famous guy, and he'd go around the different, multiple tours and gave presentations. And he always had the same chauffeur in the car. And the chauffeur commented to him, "Gee, you know, after hearing you so many times, I think I could give that presentation." And the professor goes, "Well, why don't we do that? Why don't we change positions and you can do that?" So he gives his talk. He was like I think it was in nuclear physics or something like that. Got done, went through the thing fairly well. And then he says, "Well, are there any questions?" And somebody asked him a fairly tough question. And he goes, "You know, that question's so easy. I think I'm going to let my chauffeur answer that." And he hands it to him. Well, I'm in a similar position as the chauffeur and as the professor, the substitute. And a lot of people contributed slides to this. My area is actually in really ingredients and formulations and characterization of materials, and a lot of this has to do with IM. So a lot of people contributed to this. So unlike the professor, I think there are people in the audience like Ken Tomasello and people like that I can reach out to if I have any problems. So again, I'm from the Naval Surface Warfare Center. We're one of 8 surface warfare centers in the Naval Sea Systems Command. There's 8 surface warfare centers and 2 undersea warfare centers. The Naval Sea Systems Command is the largest acquisition organization in the Navy, has about 75,000 people, and has a budget of about $60 billion a year of the Navy's allocation of $142 billion out of the $750-some billion defense budget. So each of the warfare centers, have major capabilities, and our warfare center is basically energetic materials, all things related to that. So on the next slide, this is the outline I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about, and is there a mouse here on the? Is it on the pad, or you use the pad? Okay, great, got it, thank you. So basically, I'm going to kind of go over the chronology and then talk about some of the incidents that formed our IM program, and then the NOSA, which is really the Naval Ordnance Safety and Security Activity, which handles all the things about ships and the safety on ships and shores, the IMAD program that generated from some of those incidents, return to the great power competition that we're facing now that kind of redirected our efforts, and then talking about the programs, and I'll get into that in details, from Undersecretary of Defense Research and Engineering, which are joint programs, and I'll get into that, and then the naval strategy that addresses the power competition, ONR S&T efforts in our organization, the Program Executive Office that handles S&T in the Navy, that's 6.1 through 6.3 research. That's about a $2 billion investment, and that's really focused on discovery, innovation, and demonstration. And then I'll talk about some of our efforts at Indian Head aligned to those things, and then some conclusions. So the chronology, really, I think the major events in the chronology really starts in 1842, almost 178 years ago, where they stood up the Ordnance and Hydrology Bureau. And in those days, it was really under the Navy. It's interesting, we're going to be talking about timelines here from like 178 years ago to today. And at the bottom of the talk, we're talking about the Navy things. We're talking about timelines in the order of 1 quadrillionth of a second, and basically, very rapid events. So highlights here, I think, are the establishment of DDESB in 1949, and then the WESR being established from the Forrestal incident, and then NAVSEA standing up of the insensitive munitions program, which Ken Tomasello in the audience, Mr. Tomasello, is involved in under the NOSA. And that was really set up by Captain Ray Beauregard, and unfortunately he just passed away on September 30th, and he was actually the captain at NAVSEA that stood up the IMAD program. And then I think another important thing here is that in '99, basically the Naval Ordnance Center transferred to the Naval, the NOSA as it stands now under NAVC. And in 2001, there was an instruction put out by the Congress that recognized the value of IM that made it law. And after that was initiated, Mr. Tony Melita, who was at the Office of in AT&L, Acquisition Technology and Logistics, who ran the Office of Munitions and the Office of Munitions. And basically, he was able to establish the Joint Insensitive Munitions Technology Program, which really addresses the shortfalls in the S&T areas. And that was really our major capability across the services to support IM. So we had some at the IMAD level, but that's 6.4 level. That's the advanced demonstration level. It's a different amount of money and a different type of money, and it really is advanced development. It doesn't take care of the science and technology that builds the base to go to the next level. So here is an example of the Forrestal, and it's kind of a thing that I think woke up the Navy, really. And in that situation, it's an interesting story. It was a Zuni rocket was inadvertently initiated, and it hit an aircraft. And interestingly, the pilot of that aircraft was Senator John McCain in those days. And what happened is it started a fuel fire. And the fuel fire basically continued, and the bombs in those days were Comp B. They were basically melt cast explosives. They're fairly cheaply made in McAllister, Oklahoma. That's where we really make the melt casts. And what happens with TNT is that it has a nasty habit of cracking when it ages. And as you're aware, as it cracks, you increase the surface area, and if you increase the surface area, you increase the burning rate, and it leads to deflagration to detonation transition. So what happened was that the fire started off, and it was really all the scenarios of IM, right? So the thing starts burning, and basically the bombs start detonating, and then the crews come up, and they're trying to put out the bombs, and a slow cook-off scenario in that case. And then from sympathetic detonation and blast, the bombs kept going off, the crews kept getting wiped off the ship. This was during the Vietnam War. And we almost lost the carrier because the fuel started to dump down at the bottom of the ship, and but luckily they were able to save it. And from that, we sort of woke up, and that really started the initiation of really the IM program. And as I said before, Ray Beauregard, Captain Beauregard, who just passed away, was instrumental in standing up that program. So that program resides under the NOSA, and basically the Naval Ordnance and Safety and Security Activity under Mr. Dale Sessions, who's the executive director. It's under the Naval Sea Systems Command 05, Admiral Selby, who's is the chief engineer for the NAVC. And they manage the WESERB that basically approves the weapons that go on the ship, and then they also manage the IMAD program. And here you see the cycle of the IMAD program really based on basically the S&T needs that are here. And this is an area of importance because basically that was really fed by the Joint Insensitive Munitions Technology Program. Somehow that went, next slide. But anyway, it must have been moving it. And what that did is that generates, IMAD needs really in technology transmission plans that is a call from the PEOs for the weapons. And that goes into the IM strategic plan. And then that goes through the cycle where they look at the life cycle of the weapons, the hazards, the IM tests, consequence of the reaction, loops around and does the same thing. And this is a pretty good situation, but the weakness here is the S&T piece. And the S&T piece, we really relied on in those days, the Joint Insensitive Munitions Technology Program that was out of AT&L. And this is an example of the technology investments in that area. And we're looking here at really it's the program office pull for the technologies. And because of the congressional requirement of reporting, they have to do work toward IM, because if you don't, you have to get a waiver from the JROC, and they don't like to do that. So basically you have a roadmap in the 5 munition areas, and really it covers high performance propulsion. That's like ammonium perchlorate, aluminized type propellants, and basically then min smoke rocket propellants. We use those for they're very important for signatures. They're typically nitrate ester based. They have issues with aging. And then blast fragment warheads. Typically things are fairly getting toward ideality, but the anti-armor ones are really the ideal explosives, where the reactions are occurring in microseconds, and basically the whole reaction's over. It starts in femtoseconds and ends in, it's all over in a microsecond. The detonation velocities are in the order of 10 kilometers a second, high detonation pressures, 3,000 degrees K at the center. And then that moves on to the S&T required to do that, and that really was, again, supplied by the JIMTP program, but things changed, and we'll get into that in a minute. And then Advanced Technology Program, where really that stuff that came from the 6.1 and 6.2 and 6.3 programs transitioned across what we call the Valley of Death into the acquisition programs. And the beginning of that is in the 6.4 program. And that's where the IMAD program really qualifies the munitions, and they become Navy qualified explosives that go into the weapons. And then lastly, there's their technology transition plan. That's really required if they're going to give them funding by the program office that says, yes, if we invest in this, we'll transition it. We'll try to. So unfortunately, unfortunately really, we focused a lot on IM because of the congressional requirement, and the IM program really sustained the energetic community. During this time, it was really during the Iraqi wars and things like that. We were really looking at terrorist states. So the issues there were really looking at IEDs and things like that, and we really took our eyes off the ball of really increasing power and range in our weapons. And as a result, basically they continued to build up. We have a problem with China and the South China Sea, which I'm sure Australia is very concerned about. And then the reemergence of Russia in the Arctic, and the fact that we're getting reduction in global, increase in global warming, and that's melting the ice. And that jeopardizes the Navy's position to have free access to the seas and trade. So it's a huge issue, and some of those issues, the rapid advancements of technology now, there's low barriers to entry. The level to get into a conflict, a war, a major war is increasing. New technology are evolving, and basically that leads to new ways of fighting. So the opportunity is outlined here by Mr. Dale Ormond. He was the Director of S&T, Science and Technology, in the Office of the Undersecretary of State for Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. And he points out here that really technology is our only real hope, because basically our adversaries have huge logistics capabilities, especially in China, and they're an industrial base. And if we want to have a conflict with them, we have to somehow figure out the logistics in order to support a war like that, in order to win more than a battle, but win the war. And I think that the idea here is that if we focus on increasing our technology, we can avoid that, because the adversary will feel the risk is too high. So as a result of changes in our country, there was actually something happened with Senator McCain. Here we go back to Senator McCain, who was on the plane earlier. And he was actually the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee. In our country, the money comes from the Congress. The Congress allocates the money to the executive branch, which executes that, the money that comes from Congress, and the courts decide whether it's constitutionally appropriate. So basically, in that way, he felt that basically our former setup, where we actually was acquisition technology and logistics, and under them was what they call Department of Defense Research and Engineering. And they were subordinate to AT&L. And Senator McCain felt that we weren't doing things fast enough, we weren't buying things fast enough, so he wanted to take the power out of AT&L's hands, and what he wanted to do is bring the power down really to the services in order to be able to acquire things more quickly. And I'm not sure that was a great plan, but it's the plan that we have. So an NDA 17, National Defense Authorization Act 17, we realigned the organizations. We set up two equivalent organizations. One, Research and Engineering, USD, Undersecretary of Defense Research and Engineering, and that was under Dr. Griffin, Michael Griffin. He was actually a NASA administrator. The guy's like a super genius, really technical, great guy. And then Acquisition and Sustainment is under Miss Lord, Ellen Lord. And she really has comes from an industrial environment. Her strength is in sensors. So that half of the house worries about transitioning the technology, that acquisition and sustainment. So worrying about the fleet, worrying about acquiring large weapon systems and things like that, where R&E is focused on the really science and technology, really looking at the basic and applied research in order to give those capabilities to the warfighter. So as a result, the program was stood up many years ago, the Joint Munitions Program, and it was in, as I said before, Line Warfare and Munitions, got it right this time, under George Kopsack, and it went on to Tony Melita. And he fashioned this Joint Munitions Program that took money out of the D lines and basically established programs in those areas to harvest that technology. When this change occurred, it moved everything out of A&S that was originally there to R&E, and R&E has a different focus. So what they said is, well, you've done IM long enough, and really we want to focus now toward the great power competition. So we're going to refocus all your efforts to enhancing lethality, and which includes increasing range, increasing logistics capability, increasing reliability as well, and look at lethality, range, and speed. And so they refocused the programs, and they said, well, IM programs, that's great. You're not going to start studying anymore with the slow cook-offs. You want to maintain the IM, but now your goal is to basically enhance the lethality. So as a result, I think it's sort of a tough hit for the IM program, because now there's no S&T feed really to further the IM. It's just focused really on enhancing the performance, and really it's up to the program executive offices and things like that to fund that type of work, which really is out of their ballpark. So we'll have to see how that goes in the future. So as a result, they focus toward the technology, and the program has been realigned under R&E from the Joint Insensitive Munitions Program to the Joint Enhanced Munitions Program, with the objectives that I just said. And then under that program is also the Joint Fuse Technology Program, and another program there is basically the Joint Munitions Program, and that relies on capabilities at the NNSA labs, the National Security, National Naval Nuclear Security Agency capabilities in those labs, and they really handled the nuclear weapons. So really the services are really the delivery vehicles for the weapons. The nuclear weapons are completely controlled by the Department of Energy under NNSA. So the typical focus of these programs, and the JMP program, is they really look at modeling and simulation, advanced diagnostics, energetic materials. At the Joint Fuse programs look at things like, fusing capabilities, hard target penetration, things like that. The JMTP program now has refocused its efforts toward high performance propulsion, min signature blast fragments, while maintaining IM, but still trying to enhance performance. So it's a harder goal, harder to reach. And basically the Joint Munitions Program, their real strength was in modeling and simulation. So what they need to do is sort of give them the underlying S&T knowledge that they need, leveraging the DOE lab's capability to sort of help guide the Joint Fuse Program, the JMTP program as well. And then another program that's under R&E, and I hope I'm not running over time here, is basically is focusing on what we call the communities of interest, and they're under basically the all three services, what do they call them? But it's under R&E, and they're the weapons CO. One of them is the weapons COI, the community of interest. So under those programs, they have a thing called applied research for the advancement of S&T, And under that program is an Awrap program, and we've got funding for that for enhanced energetic material effects. So the JMTP program is under Anthony DeStasio. He's the program manager, and it's focused, as I said before, on high energy propulsion, MIN signature propellants, trying to enhance the capability, area effects, hard target penetrators, and gun propulsion. And you know, the hard target penetrators are tough because really those are ideal explosives. So they're very hard to get, you know, IM compliance for sympathetic detonation on a thing that's 95% HMX. That's tough to do. And then the gun propulsion, really, the Navy has a big focus on that now because really our S&T focus was on rail guns. And it turns out rail guns are great as far as depth of magazines, but they're not great on trying to get the ordnance out of the magazine because after a few shots, there's issues. So one of the focuses is hypervelocity projectile, and that's really looking at trying to increase range and speed with regular powder guns. So there's a big focus there in being able to do that, to increase the range and speed of the projectile. So, as I said, I just went over this earlier about the Joint Fuse Technology Program goals. And then the Awrap goal is pretty unique in that we're looking at machine learning-based tools in order to explore new synthesis routes and new formulation routes to different ingredients. We're looking at developing new ingredients, nano ingredients and things like that, and trying to get energy out quicker, because managing the energy on target is one of the main things we're looking at. We're looking at continuous flow reactors, resonance acoustic mixing, additive manufacturing, and then the culmination of that program, which is 3 years, is to demonstrate a rocket propellant using that technology and demonstrating the capability. And that's under Dr. Sue Pierce, who's the ST at AFRL Eglin. So again, the naval focuses the great power competition, and we really follow our lead from the National Defense Strategy and the CNO's maritime design for maritime superiority, and the Chief of Naval Research is focused on his S&T framework, and the framework focus there is on lethality, enhancing lethality. And I think this lethality is more toward basically increasing range, speed, and performance on target, increasing PK. So I work for Mr. Ashley Johnson. He's the technical director for the Naval Surface Warfare Center at Indian Head, and he's been a champion really for establishing this thing called the Energetics Renaissance. And the Energetics Renaissance is really focused on reestablishing the S&T capabilities in the warfare centers, and we had basically a meeting with, we created a roadmap with the help of NavAir, our partner. They are the Naval Air War Weapons Center in China Lake, and then with the program offices and with OPNAV, and developed a roadmap to do this. And really this addresses all naval domains. So the Navy is sort of a microcosm of all the services. We have expeditionary warfare with the Marines, we have undersea warfare, which is unique, and then we have surface warfare, and then on the surface we have an Air Force. So we address all these. So basically we focused on innovation to look at the technology base, the gaps, and maintain maritime superiority. So again, the focus is on increased range and speed. And as alluded to earlier, we need to maintain the IM because we got to get the weapons to the target. We have a bunch of things at the bottom of the sea because the weapons went off. One of them is the examples, the Arizona in Honolulu. So basically, the thrust areas for the energetics S&T areas are propulsion, high performance propulsion, increased range and speed, use the energy more effectively, try to get the energy out quicker, control energy release, things like on and off propulsion. And one thing that points out here is that the fine line between kinetic stability and increasing the energy output. And we're talking about the energy of activation, right? So the energy of activation is what gives you the kinetic stability. All the energetics are thermodynamically unstable. So the idea here is if you decrease this bridge, you're going to get the energy out quicker, but at the same time, you're going to destabilize the material. So it's a tough, characterization to occur. Usually that barrier is around 33 kilocalories per mole for a typical material. When you start getting under that, you're going to have problems. And then the other area here is that we're looking at explosive effects, coupling the energy more quickly on targets. For instance, aluminized explosives have a lot more energy, but we can't get it out fast enough. For things like shape-charged jet and for blast and to move fragments, you've got to really get the thing out in microseconds. We don't have the time to wait for milliseconds. And so far, we've been successful in doing that, even by reducing the particle size to nanomaterials. And then the question here is, do we need more energy or do we need to be able to handle the energy? I think that both. And then basically smaller package and greater lethality, and then again, the focus on maintaining lethality. And all this requires a fundamental understanding of efforts toward making new ingredients, new formulations, novel manufacturing methods. The Vice Admiral or the Director of Ordnance here just said that, RAM, gave an example of RAM, resonance acoustic mixing. We're looking at that, and then advanced diagnostics, being able to look at these things very quickly, and then modeling and simulation. And then again, we always have this problem that we're creating the technology, but at the same time we need to pull it along. We need to be able to transition it to the warfighter, and that requires money. And our partners here are the services, the SysComs, and the PEOs. So this addresses the energetics S&T area, really, which is focused on fundamental things. And here we're talking about new energetic material development, understanding sensitivity and performance from the atomistic level to the molecular level. We look at ignition and growth. And this really relies on modeling and simulation. This is a huge area for opportunities for IM. And one of the things that you have to understand is we know the state function. We can absolutely predict where the product is going to go. The problem is we can't predict the path. And to do that, you need to use really sophisticated quantum mechanics or molecular dynamics, and that's intractable. So that we are trying to understand that more. And then novel diagnostics, to look at these things, energy release mechanisms in very fast timescales over very short distances. And then again, reduce the energetic material sensitivity to initiation while still enhancing performance. So to do this, we can increase weapon range and speed, reduce vulnerability, and accelerate weapon integration. So the S&T areas at Indian Head are very much focused along the same lines, looking at high energy materials, reactive materials. That's a new way of delivering energy to targets. Again, I had to keep this in a distro A type discussion, so we can't go into a lot of details. We're talking about different fusing technology, on and off propulsion. One huge area is autonomous vehicles, being able to work on autonomous vehicles. The issue there runs into legal issues about, can you make a lethal weapon and who has control, and really have to man in a loop. And that's very, very highly debated. And then advanced modeling and simulation, prototyping methods. And one of the latest things we're looking at is synthetic biology, looking at enzymes and things like that to make precursors for energetic materials. So, in our conclusions, we believe that we can enhance DoD weapon performance by range and speed and effects in all areas of our domains of interest, and by pushing our technology ahead, again, we will maintain the IM capabilities, and we'll continue to invest in the S&T workforce capabilities and facilities, and try our best to rapidly transition the technology of the warfighter and the fleet at the lowest possible cost. And again, here I'd like to acknowledge the huge number of people that contributed slides, the invitations, Bernard for coordinating with me to get this thing set up, a number of people in the audience, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm sure I've moved into somebody else's time by now.
Say a few words. Stand over there.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Dr. Stern, for coming down to Australia to deliver Keynote. Your presentation was an insightful discussion of strong connection between innovation and support to our warfighters. The focus during contemporary discussions on IM has been to increase safety, but I was particularly interested in how the discussion around IM is now being focused at a prism of increased strategic competition and requirement for enhanced lethality, and I think that's across the world at the moment. especially from governments and the strategic situation. So really appreciate that you covered that, and obviously how the priorities are changing at the government level, especially in the directions we're going. So before we thank him and present him with a certificate and a presentation of appreciation, what I'd like to do is spend a couple of minutes asking around the room if you'd like to ask any questions for the doctor. If you want to, please put your hand up and one of my staff will bring a microphone up to you. Any questions?
Thanks for the presentation, Alfred. Just a comment perhaps on international engagement from US labs and the programs as part of your enhanced programs you discussed there. How are you engaging international allies in these programs? Thank you.
Okay, the question was, how do we do international cooperation in the program? And I was trying to remember the name of the R&E organization. I think they call them, what do they call them? They're the deputy assistant secretaries of the different services. And we have them through Project Reliance, through OSD. And they run the international programs. They interact through the NATO and through the Technology Transition Program. And that's one way that we coordinate there, especially with the 5 I countries where we can deal with things that are on the classified level. We also have data exchange agreements and international program arrangements through the Navy, through basically the Naval International Program Office, NIPO, and then also through OSD, and basically through the, what do they call that, Project Reliance, and I can't remember the name of the group, but basically it's the Service Under Secretary. So they're in charge of that, and that's how we interact. And actually next week, we're going to be at the TTCP addressing some of those issues. So does that answer your question? And then ONR also has international programs as well, the Office of Naval Research with different countries and things like that under project arrangements and grants to universities. I should say that the ONR level, we have a Distro A type thing where we fund universities and things like that to do basic research, really basic research that is applicable to all sorts of areas. And then we harvest some of that for our 6.2 and 6.3 efforts, is really focused toward weaponization and demonstration. And that's within our warfare centers and our UARCs, University Affiliated Research Centers, and FFRDCs, federally funded development centers. So basically, we work through the whole international community through all those venues that I just mentioned.
Any other questions? Yep. Looks like I think we all know each other.
Sir, with the push towards performance and noting, I guess, a waiver is a very late in the game downstream concession, I guess, towards having the most high-end compliant solution. How effective do you find a downstream waiver at driving upstream design choices?
So you're talking about the requirements basically for the weapon capability and the S&T that is focused toward that? Is that what your question is?
For design choices that lead to more IM compliant solutions.
Well, you know, under the JMTP, formerly the JIMTP program, and also the IM program, they definitely look at, the design of the ordnance and things like that. Like a lot of the things that was huge for the Navy were our vertical launch systems and how do we deal with that, and fires on those things and standard missile and things like that, and how do we address those? So those capabilities get, fed back. But I think that for the IM aspect, it's going to be more difficult now because we're missing that S&T piece that really develops the seed corn there to address those IM things. So I think that, the requirements now really come from the fleet really, and they come through the joint chiefs. So basically, each service has a prioritization, at OSD, and they basically through the joint chiefs, and they vote on that really, and what gets prioritized. So it really comes down from, the the call from the fleet to the acquisition organizations as to what they need, and then that message goes down, further down to the S&T organizations to design the technology to provide that. But you know, one thing you have to keep in mind is that, give you an example, CL20, that was an energetic ingredient that was developed at China Lake in 1985. So it first saw its light of day in a munitions system 30 years later. So there's a huge lag right now as far as rapidly transitioning that to the warfighter out of 6.2 into acquisition. And then again, as I pointed out, you have to have a system pull in order to get it out there. And then the program offices have to take the risk to do it, and there's only so much money. And it all comes down to like money in the end. Does that answer your question?
Good morning. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I really like the phrase explosive energetic renaissance. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how in the US and the wider community we can attract the next generation of energetic.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. My hearing isn't great. Can you speak up? Sorry.
I really like the phrase energetic renaissance. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how we can attract and retain the next generation of energetic materials scientists. How we can make the industry attractive again?
Well, you know, so your question is, how do you feel that we can attract the next generation of science and engineers within the energetics community? That's your question. Pardon me? And to retain them. Well, that's a tough question. You know, with the new people coming in, they're generational issues. So, you know, in my generation, you know, we sort of like followed what, I guess I'm a baby boomer. So before that, there was like you know, I didn't even know the name of that generation. It was really the World War II generation, a tough generation, what does Tom Brokaw call them, the greatest generation. So anyway, in those days, you know, we looked toward, you know, a typical career, and we would, you know, look toward retirement and things like that. We'd stay in an organization a long time. That's not the new generation. They don't look for that. So I think some of the things that really annoy them, as far as in my organization, because I don't really speak for it, is that basically buying things are very difficult. So, for instance, when we try to buy things, we have this rules that go through really what they call the JCIDS process and 5001 acquisition regulation programs in order to prevent, you know, improper use of government taxpayer money. And so there's lots of regulations. So as a result, it takes a long time to acquire things. So the S&Es, scientists and engineers, what they want to do is they want to do things quickly. They want to do things really quickly. So basically, they don't like that. They don't like the fact that, you know, they can't get things quickly. In the old days, when I was a division head, we could call up Aldrich Chemical Company and we could have something in 2 days. Now it could take a month. So, and I think the larger acquisition organizations feel that too. They can't buy things fast enough. We can't get it out to the fleet fast enough, to the services fast enough. So that, you know, is around the board. And then the other issue is IT. Our IT is dated. It's really, you know, and they don't like that. They want to have, modern IT. They want to be able to reach out there. But at the same time, we have cybersecurity issues. So I think it's going to be hard, because I think in the future we're going to have to worry more about cybersecurity, more worry about attacks and things like that. So I think that freedom is going to go down. But one thing I think that we have in our favor is the technology and what we do is absolutely fantastic. It's really seductive. It's really interesting. I'm not sure they understand the ramifications in the end, but the science and technology is fantastic. It's what they love, and then the ability to go out and, you know, reach out to the international community and travel and meet people and things like that, and a fair amount of autonomy that we give them to do the work, I think that keeps them. So we have some that stay, some that move on. We'd like to, you know, have more stay, but, you know, it's a tough battle. And I think the one thing to do it is to, you know, maybe for the program offices and places like that, to, you know, provide more S&T dollars to attract people like that, RDT and E dollars as well. Navy's a little different. We're the working capital fund system. So typical services like the Air Force have money allocated to them at Congress at the beginning of the year. So the S&Es don't have to write proposals and things like that to bring in money. In the Navy, they do. So basically, they don't particularly care for that. Some people don't like to do that. On the other hand, if there's a cutback in funding from the Congress, they could have a RIF in the Air Force. Where in the Navy, it's in the acquisition program. So when the government shuts down and they have CAs and things like that, we're working capital funds, so we can persist. So I think all those things together are sort of an effect. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. I'll just move over there. Sure. Just so people can see. So a small memento, appreciation of the contribution to Parari 2019, and express our appreciation, especially mine, for delivering the keynote and contributing to Parari. We'd like to provide you with this certificate and also a small memento takeaway to remember this symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.